So we are good to go. And Trista, before we get going, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the state capital of Montana in Helena. I've been working in this field for, I think I just celebrated my 14th year at this agency. But I feel like the work has kind of been lifelong as it's been part of even just my family culture. I am a mental health consultant for an early Head Start program, but then also a lead clinician for the program across the state that holds those early Head Start funds. So we provide mental health consultation to our teachers in the early Head Start program. And then we also, as clinicians, provide direct care services to families in our community for children 0 to 8. I'm a global trainer for parent-child interaction therapy. And, you know, just trying to make a difference where I can, when I can, with the families and, doing the work.
Which sounds like leadership to me, which is the basis of our conversation today. And
Right.
so, so a lot of people are going to, well, I don't think they're going to ask the question, but I think they can totally relate to the idea of we as adults needing mental health, which is different than therapy, right? I mean, so we just want to make that connection. But can you speak to the connection between mental health and leadership? Like, how do those work together?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe for the sake of the conversation, we maybe hold mental health side by side with well-being.
Yes.
And so for the sake of leadership and well-being, um, we have to hold those so close, because if our people are not well, right, then our leadership will not be accepted, or it will not be effective. Effective is a better word. The leadership will not be effective. And so when I think about how those two are connected, for me, it's really about staying connected to those that we're leading and seeing them for their whole selves instead of just the role that they play, which gets a little tricky. But it reminds me a lot of, kind of, as we're supporting teachers, and some of you out there who are listening are probably educators yourself. Whereas we're teaching children, we have to remember that they have so many other components to them than just showing up in classroom and being ready to learn. They have families, they have experiences, they have feelings, and all of these are so different than sometimes of our own. So trying to see the people we lead for who they are as a person versus just the role that they play in our purpose, right?
Yeah. So earlier we were talking with one of our speakers, and we talked about a sense of who you be. Right. And so this understanding that when we come to work, and again, it's not just professional lives, it's in our personal lives too, but we get to show up with all of these facets of ourselves,
Mhm.
and taking a look at that. And one of the things that I wrote down as you were talking about, let's pair the words mental health with well-being, because that's the context that we're talking about, which is absolutely terrific. And so I wrote down the idea of pouring into ourselves,
Yes.
right,
Yeah.
before we pour into others, right, and using the analogy of the well, right, or the even the pitcher of water, or the saucer cup, as you say, and making sure that our beings, ourselves, are poured into whatever that looks like for us, to
Mhm.
fill up our cup, so that we give from a sense of overflow,
Mm.
which is novel for us as leaders and very hard. I'm going to overgeneralize here, so
Yeah.
people might yell at me, but I'm going to overgeneralize and say, especially for women.
Okay. And let's continue to overgeneralize and say for women in helping positions.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
because we tend to give to everyone else. And then if we have anything left over, then that's the little piece that we get.
Mm.
And so we're ending up, being fried, burnt out,
Mhm.
overwhelmed, tired, not getting enough sleep to, oversleeping,
Mhm.
overeating, over drinking. I mean, the list can go on and on and on. And you slap COVID on top of it,
Oh, yeah, the wonderful pandemic. Yeah.
right? And everything else that's been going on over the past year, it's no
Mhm.
wonder that our health has been just gone out the window.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you're talking, Deidre, I'm thinking, I mean, this is not a new issue. We've got a lot of data out there around, let's even just look at Head Start, early Head Start. There's data out there that shows that our workforce is unhealthy. We are stressed. We are overweight. We don't have a lot of healthy coping skills. Now, of course, this is generalizing. This is what the data shows the majority of the population. And as you were talking, we know that there's been a lot of efforts around this idea of self-care, right? In fact, I was supporting a group, I think, from Maryland the other day, and one of the ladies said, if someone says self-care one more time, I'm walking out, and or I'm turning off my camera and I'm done. And I think there's this balance between like, how do we care for self, but how do we stop framing that as like going to get a massage or, having to have these material things. And so as you were talking, I'm thinking it's not self-care, it's self-love.
Mm,
How do we love ourselves enough to know that we're worthy enough to set good
mm.
boundaries with our work, to ask for help when we're feeling overwhelmed? How do we love ourselves enough to say, this work is not all that I am, it's what I do? And have things like, it's not self care, it's about loving ourselves enough to bring into our lives that make us whole.
Okay, that is very profound. I didn't know we were going to go so deep this afternoon.
It's Friday afternoon, go big or go home.
And I love it because I mean no better time, right? It's Friday afternoon, or in Hawaii we would say pauhana, right? It's the end of the week. And so some of us think about the weekend and about, oh my gosh, all of the things I've got to do, the chores or the this or the that that didn't get done during the week, or
Mhm.
all the things that I have to do to get ready for the week. And yet, what I loved and what I want to zero in on is your the way you framed it was just beautiful in terms of not so much self-care, but self-love.
Mhm.
And when we're talking about being in our leadership, and I want everyone to just really hear this, I mean, just really lean in and hear this. When we are talking about being in our leadership, we are in self-love.
Mhm.
When we are out of leadership, that's when we're gaining the weight or doing some of these unhealthy habits where, again, from food or whatever, lack of exercise, boundaries, not holding our boundaries. So I've
Mhm.
heard so many people during the pandemic talk about, yeah, with Zoom, I find myself, on meetings or answering emails because I'm working from home at 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night.
Oh, no. Yeah, absolutely. Or stacking, right? Because we're home. And I heard a lot of people being like, so I just, every hour. And I was guilty of this too.
Mhm.
Like I'm home,
Yep.
right? So then the gremlins come in and they're like, well, you're at home. You should be able to. And then I would be on my fourth back-to-back Zoom and I would think, I got nothing left. I got nothing left. I can't show up in the way that I want to. I don't have the energy. And it was the expectation that, so the self love wasn't there. What I was doing was like shaming. You're home. You should be able to do this. Go ahead, stack yourself up. You have to help. You're the helper. Get out there. And then I learned, but I can't. I had to hit rock bottom, to be honest with you, Deidre. And that's for me, that's how I learn is I've got to just get smacked down. And I learned my lesson. And so I had kind of had, I'm going to use a term from someone that I'm supporting in one of my groups, and she called it a melting moment.
Mm.
I had a melting moment of just, I think all of it came, and I said, if I'm going to do good work, I have to do me first. I can't do this much, but I can do this much with a break, and then I can do some more. And so we're constantly reevaluating, right? Self-love is about being okay with putting your best effort forward and then adjusting, right? You setting the expectations, not living into someone else's expectations, having confidence within your work. Yeah. And when you said, when you are in leadership, true leadership, you are in self-love, there's so many layers to that. And so I want to unpack a little bit of, we know leadership is it. Most of us have had people that are like, do as I say, not as I do type of leadership style. And I don't like, that's not, I mean, I grew up in a household that was like, I brought you in this world, I'll take you out, do what I say, not as, and I don't want that, right? Like, I don't want to embody that. But when I am not in my leadership, when I'm not practicing self-love, then inadvertently, I am not living into the leadership that I'm trying to hold, or that I'm preaching, right? Or that I am extending to some of the clinicians that I support, or the teachers that I'm supporting. It becomes almost like hypocritical in a way, like, right?
Yeah. So earlier we talked about being enrolled, and people don't realize, but we're either in enrollment or being enrolled all day long. We get to ask ourselves, what do we want to be enrolled in? So when you were talking about, and I'm a fanatic note taker, so I take notes all the time. So when you were talking about the shaming, right? And our earlier speaker, Diane Campbell, was talking about being in self-doubt, right? And beating ourselves up after the fact about our decisions. When we are then enrolling in that deficit thinking, which does not serve us, and we have stepped out of leadership. So I want to, again, I want to get this idea across to people that somewhere down the line, people have thought that being self-critical, right, or overextending ourselves, right, and draining ourselves dry is what good leaders do. They give it all till there's nothing left.
Well, then eventually you have to be done. If you have nothing left, then your leadership has to end. And I want to be a leader that can go the distance.
Say that again. Say that again.
I want to go the distance. I want to be there. The people that I'm leading, and one of the questions that you had kind of prompted in the email was kind of like, what was the hardest lesson that you had to learn, right? And I really had to sit with that. And it took me back to a time I was coaching pyramid model with a group of early educators, and they were just, with good intentions, there was frustration around like, but how do we get educators to like hear? Like, how do we get them to know all the things? How do we get them to this? What we came up with was the word wisdom. And so I had asked them, well, how did you get here? How did you get to your wisdom? And when we could unpack it, we found that like we're all on the journey, and this is not new news, right? We all know we're on our own journey. But sometimes when we're in leadership, we forget that it's the experiences that we have that then feed the wisdom, right? And so when we have program pressures, when we have outcome pressures, I think sometimes leadership forgets that it takes time, and that we have to be intentional with extending those experiences. If I'm a leader who only runs until I got nothing left, then I'm cutting short the experiences that I can offer to get people to wisdom, to get people to like deeper understanding of their practice.
See, because now you're talking about grit and resilience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what you're talking about, and especially because there's so many ways to go. When we're working with children, there is such an urgency, and I say this all the time, there is such an urgency about what we do because we only have them for a short amount of time. And because we're in early childhood, the impact we have on them is lifelong. And so we want to be in it for the long haul.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to trust. And that's the hard part. Like when we work in early childhood and sometimes leadership, we as humans are kind of like people who operate on feedback, right? So like I'm going to give a little, I'm going to wait and watch, and I'm going to see if what I'm doing is meeting the expectation or if it's working or like all of those things. And so when we're working in early childhood, like it can become overwhelming because we want the kids to be okay, or we want them to learn the things like we want them to, but then for a second, then it starts to feel like we're the only ones. We're the only ones responsible. And that's not true. We talk about with the path to wisdom, right? I don't walk that path with them the whole way. People who have contributed to my wisdom are not with me really anymore. There's many that I can hold in mind that I don't have with me every day or on a regular basis. They were seasons that have come and gone, but have contributed to my understanding. As early educators, we are a season, a very important season, but a season of which we're extending experiences, we're opening opportunity, but then more seasons will come and more people will come and they will build on the foundation of what you set for them. And it's the same for leadership.
Okay, so drop the mic.
Moonwalk out, right?
And so this is one of the, not the only one, but one of the biggest reasons that I asked you to come and be a part of the summit, because I loved your wisdom.
Oh,
And definitely, I mean, and I love the way that you frame it, and so that we can all understand it, and also your the strategies and just the way you relay information so that it empowers everyone that you're working with. Because you and I recently went through a training where you were facilitating it, and it was terrific. And I want to go there for a couple of minutes, because it was one of the things that you said that was incredible to me around leadership that I don't know that people understand or see, and I wanted to bring it out.
okay.
And you were training a group of coaches or teacher leaders, facilitators, directors around, again, within the pyramid model, which is social emotional development and reducing challenging behaviors for young children. And within that context, you're actually talking about how to have our coach or facilitate group PLCs, right? Or using the practice-based coaching framework.
Mhm.
And so, while we won't get into the technicalities of that, it was when you talked about empowering teachers to reflect on their own work
Mhm.
and to share their knowledge and understanding and help them grow into, develop, and support their leadership. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So the process, the way it was being trained was really around a facilitator supporting peers, right? So educators reflecting on practices in a classroom. And when we talked, part of this model is a teacher is able, or an educator is able to then present to her peers or his peers around, here was my intention, here's what I learned, right? And here's what I want to do different. And so we were like, how do we support that? What are the questions that we ask? And I said, there's something here though, that if we go a layer deeper, yes, there's content here, but if we talk about all the things that are happening in that presentation, we're teaching life skills. We're teaching someone to choose the information they want to give to a group and maybe dance with vulnerability. We're teaching a person to be able to hold on to themselves in front of their peers and trust in their knowledge, but be open to feedback. And these are skills that are having to show up in many different roles in our lives and relationships in our lives, right? So it's not just about getting better outcomes in classrooms, right? It's not just about getting higher scores, and it's not, and I hope this doesn't sound too bad, but it's not just about the kids, because we're not separate. right? If that educator can have those skills and have that confidence and have that piece, it's absolutely going to impact their relationship with children in the classroom. And they'll know how to then transfer confidence, transfer vulnerability, transfer the ability to kind of examine the work, right? And hold on to self as we go. So, yeah, I mean, it's the experiences that have built us. It's not just content, it's process.
Absolutely. And hence the reason why I wanted you to come on and have this conversation with me, because really what you're talking about, I mean, you said transfer, and I wrote down instantly modeling.
Yeah.
And there's this understanding about the experience of it, right? And everything you're talking about is leadership, right?
Mhm.
The confidence to stand in front of a group, to share, and like you said, to share your practices, your understanding, puts you in vulnerability,
Mhm.
right? To stand there and say, here's what I did. What do you guys think? And accept and give feedback,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
is leadership. And then when you learn how to do that and you become comfortable, right? And many of us are not only are looking for competence, but that confidence as well. Then when you're working with a child or a student, regardless of the age, or with other people, then you are modeling for them also how to step into that vulnerability, also how to listen, give, and receive that feedback.
Mhm. Absolutely. And my hope is to guide and lead that when feedback is coming, and this is one of my biggest lessons along the way, is you get to decide. All that is feedback. Your people are just giving you some of their thoughts. You get to decide what you're going to keep. You get to decide what is truth. And that takes the reflection, right? And so some of the leadership is about helping people understand that choice. Because I think a lot of us, especially in the helping field, when we hear constructive feedback or sometimes criticism, if leadership isn't strong, then it comes in and hits us deep in the feels, right? So deep into the heart. And then it becomes truth, or it becomes story, it becomes shame, or it becomes like some of those things. And one of the biggest lessons I had was, no, like, I'm going to keep some of this here. That's yours. But this thing feels like something I can keep close. I'm going to think about that a little bit more. There might be some truth to that. And I'm going to think about what might be true so that I can learn and be better. Right. But there are some things we don't have to take all feedback, right? Some of it is other people's, and we get to be that filter. And that's what we get to teach through the process that I was talking about, that coaching process around, we get to prepare them for that. When I meet with an educator one-on-one and we're talking about what they're going to present to their group, we are absolutely going to talk about how they might be that filter, what it might feel like to get constructive feedback or maybe criticism if that happens, and how are they going to manage and handle, and how are they going to still know their truth and still hold on to themselves and see themselves as good and on the right path.
Yeah, see, and again, it's all leadership, right? And now you're talking about putting in now you're talking about using a process, right? That gives a structure around how to do that. Because for some of us, we need that mechanism, we need that
Yeah.
that format, that container, until we're feeling enough confidence, enough competence to be able to do it organically or in the moment. And
Mhm.
having said that, what I love about this is taking people again through this process of understanding. It's almost as if people, and I'll raise my hand because this was me at one point, need permission to have that filter up there, to not take it all in. And once
Mhm.
we give them permission, they're like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Mhm.
And so
Absolutely.
now they're grounded and anchored into
Mhm.
their leadership. And once you're anchored, before I talked about being enrolled, then you don't get sucked into the criticism, or the shaming, or the self-doubt, because you're anchored in your leadership, and you can say, you know what, thank you for the feedback. I'll consider that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah. And what gets us to that place, I think there's something that is key to us being able to be the filter, and that's reflection. We have to pause. We have to build in the pause, and we have to reflect and consider things and then make decisions. Because at times, feedback can feel piercing. Feedback can feel uncomfortable. But if we can't pause, as Brene Brown will say, we will armor up. And then we just deflect all feedback, which isn't helpful. We don't grow that way, right? Or if we have no armor and we accept all feedback, then we're not giving ourselves enough credit. And reflection and pause allows us to slowly disentangle the feedback and choose what we're keeping and choose what we're leaving.
Absolutely. And so as we start to wrap up, the time just flew right by. One of the things that stands out to me when we're talking about feedback, and it's one thing that I always refer back to, is having a firm understanding about our vision and our values.
Mhm.
So that when we're in reflection, that is the lens that we get to, run everything through. So it's not just a free for all. It's okay. Here is my intention. It might not have come out the way I wanted to, or it might not have been perceived the way I wanted to. So what does that mean based on my vision, my intention for that lesson, or my values about myself? Because
Yeah.
some feedback is going to feel really personal.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
does that ring true with my values, or not?
Mm-hmm. Brene Brown will talk about this idea of aspiring values versus practicing values. And those are different, right? And what our work is try to bringing them as close as we can to kind of overlapping. But if your value is I'm open to feedback, but then every time you get feedback, you decompensate, then we have a mismatch here, and it's trying to find ways. So when we know our values, then it can inform our behavior. It can inform decision. It can inform intention. Absolutely, Miss Deidre. And that value work is not easy. I've gone through it a couple of times, and to try to pick 3 or 4 core values, oh, that's a doozy.
And we know it changes over time, right? Based on our
But
experiences and our wisdom.
mhm,
And that's life, and that's okay.
mhm,
It's an expectation that we get to have, that things are
yep.
going to will reprioritize
Mhm.
as our life shifts and change, and ebbs and flows.
And as
So
our wisdom increases.
yes.
Yes.
Yes, I love it. So, Trista, again, I really, really appreciate you jumping on. I know you're super busy with everything that's going on over there. Um, I know that I'm not sure if um, well, I'm gonna throw it out there anyway. You can get me later, but
Do it.
if you want to reach out to Trista, we'll drop her email into the link, and she'll also have her own page. We'll drop a link in there as well. And I know that you have a handout which we're gonna actually post into your page as well for the replay. But did you want to
Beautiful.
tell us a little bit about it before we end our time together?
I would love to. And I'm so excited to share it with you all because it's been like this little gem I've been sitting on, and I just haven't quite found the right time. And then Deidre had said, so this form is to help leaders or those in leadership positions, especially working with early childhood educators, um, to practice that pause, to foster curiosity, but in a way that feels tangible. And so it's the idea, and idea is an acronym. And I give some suggestions on how, before we go into fix it mode, right? Before we go into like, let me solve it, which when we do that, we take away so much of the wisdom opportunity. Here are ways that we can slow people down, slow teachers down, and extend an experience that increases their wisdom. And this is a tough skill. And so my hope here with this handout was to break down some strategy. You know, we love acronyms, so let's throw it in an acronym, and so that we can really practice skill and make it tangible. So that was my hope with this handout.
Thank you. And I did have a chance to read through it. I'm like, yes, yes. So be on the lookout for the email for the replay, you guys, because it will be up on Trista's page. You can just click on it and download it right onto your desktop and use it for yourself or with others because it comes with great wisdom.
I've had good leadership.
I love it. So Trista, again, thank you for coming on. And I hope you're going to enjoy your Friday afternoon. And you and I will definitely get together and play some more. That's what I've been calling this, just a big sandbox. So I know we get to
Yeah,
play.
me too. Me too.
So again, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Deidre. I really appreciate it. This was fun. Let's do it
Yeah,
again.
we will.
Okay.